Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website, arh.noaa.gov, getting updates to the forecast, check out watches, warnings, advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391, get updates to the forecast through that means as well. And we have Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can watch us on YouTube. Starting off, we'll take a look at the watch and advisory that we have out for the state. Both are around the Kenai Lake area. And the first is the flood watch that is going to be in effect from Thursday evening until late Friday night. And that is along the Kenai River from Kenai Lake to the Russian River. That is due to a glacier dam release from the Snow Glacier. The advisory that we have out is in effect now until 1:45 p.m. on Friday, and that is for the low-lying areas around Kenai Lake. That does include Primrose Campground. So if you're in that area around Kenai Lake, Kenai River, watch out for rising water due to that glacier dam release. And if you want more information on that, you can check out the watch or the advisory on our website. Switching gears now, take a look at our satellite imagery. We'll start way out west where we have a low pressure that's been out there for a little while now, spinning up and bringing in some lower cloud cover, some fog and some rain to areas out in the western Bering Sea and western Aleutian Islands. As we start moving a little bit further to the east, we can see our older low pressure system out here that had a frontal system that's been bringing a lot of rain to the southwest part of the state. As that thing's starting to fall apart over the Norton Sound, it's really starting to slow down, but still enough to bring in some rain to those areas around Nome. Then as we look again, we can see a new low pressure system coming in from the North Pacific that's starting to bring in some rain to areas around the eastern Aleutian Islands and pushing in more cloud cover to the Alaska Peninsula. And that main low is down there in the southern part of the Bering Sea. We'll watch one more time, focusing on the main part of the state. We can see a lot of cloud cover out over mainland Alaska, extending down into the south central, all the way up along the Arctic coast. But we have some higher pressure here that allows for the afternoon heating to really break up a lot of that cloud cover, and we can watch those clouds disappear as we move into the afternoon hours, with the exception of up along the Arctic coastline. And we can even see some clearer skies out over the Panhandle. Moving in for the rest of the day, we can see the cloud cover staying kind of out of the way for the southeast, with the exception of the very southeastern part of the Panhandle, where there is the possibility for some isolated afternoon and evening thunderstorms out there. Then our high pressure out over mainland Alaska, keeping eastern portions of the mainland pretty clear, but along the Arctic coastline, some stratus and some fog up there, especially around the Barrow area. As we look out to the west, we can see our new main low coming in from the south, bringing in a lot of rain, eastern Aleutians extending all the way up into the Bristol Bay area, lower Kuskokwim Valley with our rain and fog mixture. And then as we get up with our front that's really starting to break apart here, bringing in some rain to areas around Nome, not quite as intense as further to the south, but still some rain and fog there, especially behind that front for the YK Delta area. Then fog throughout the remainder of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, with some rain and fog out there by the western Aleutians. As you look into tonight, that trough is going to push a little bit further east, but the rain and fog going to now extend all the way across the Bering Sea and Aleutians. Our main low pushing towards Bristol Bay now, with the frontal system now bringing up rain into areas of the Kenai Peninsula that will continue to progress further to the north, potentially making it into the Anchorage area, places south of Talkeetna and the Susitna Valley later on tonight. Then we have our diminished front now, just bringing in some continual rain to areas around the Norton Sound, and we're going to have some more rain along the remainder of the southwest coastline into the Bristol Bay area. But our high pressure keeping things pretty clear along the Arctic coastline. Not a lot of activity expected there, and that's going to be true all the way down the eastern side of the state into the Copper River Basin, and then down in the Panhandle, some pretty clear skies there as well, with the potential remaining in the evening hours for some isolated thunderstorms. Then on Thursday, things are going to clear up completely in the Panhandle, but our main front now has started to push even further in Land starting to bring rain more consistently into the Anchorage area, up closer towards Talkeetna for Cordova and Valdez as well now. But still in the majority of the interior, going to see clearer skies. But now along the Arctic coastline, going to see some fog due to that high pressure sitting overhead for so long. Then with our main low starting to weaken now, but still enough to bring in a lot of rain to the Bristol Bay area, up into the Norton Sound area as well. And then continuing to see rain and fog throughout the Bering Sea area and Aleutian Islands with that westerly flow out there. And on Friday, as our low pushes a little bit further to the east, going to see those showers lingering around in the Bering, but that's mostly in the central and eastern portions. Just some areas of fog way out west underneath some of the higher pressure that we can see out there. Along the main part of the state, all the southern half, we can see with our low really starting to fall apart now. A lot of shower activity anywhere from Fairbanks down through the south central into the Gulf, and some showers now in the Panhandle as well, especially in the northern portion. Central portion is a little bit lighter, but southern portions for most of the day on Friday should stay pretty dry. But we have another low bringing in some rain in the area there in the eastern parts of the Gulf. Then out over the northern parts of the interior up through the Brooks Range, pretty clear, but areas of fog lingering around all along the Arctic coastline on Friday. Taking a look at our temperatures as of this afternoon, upper 50s, lower 60s for the Panhandle area, 63 for Craig, 62 for Yakutat, 59 there for Skagway. As we look out over the south central area, upper 50s to lower 60s most locations. Warmer there for Cordova, 64, 63 for Valdez, colder in Glen Allen, 52 degrees there, and 57 for Kodiak. As we look up into the interior, mid-50s for most locations, 56 there for Fairbanks. Colder as we get closer to Arctic Village, 48 degrees this afternoon. And then in the 40s for the most part along the Arctic coastline. And we're going to see a trend here, warmer out west, colder out to the east. That's going to last for the next couple days. 39 degrees this afternoon for Kaktovik, coldest up along the Arctic coast. Then in the Kotzebue Sound area, mid-50s there. Upper 40s to mid-50s as we get into the Norton Sound area. 46 degrees for Gamble. Looking down in the southwest part of the state, mid-50s in the YK Delta, and then anywhere from the upper 40s to lower 60s around Bristol Bay. Dillingham, the coldest there, 48 degrees. Then as we look out over the Aleutian Islands in the lower to mid-50s there, Adak a little bit warmer, 55 degrees, 52 for St. Paul, and 50 degrees for St. George. Lows for tonight staying around 50 degrees throughout the Aleutian Islands, a little bit lower there, St. Paul, dropping down to 47 tonight. Then in the upper 40s to lower 50s for the Bristol Bay area, King Salmon 52 degrees. And the mid to upper 40s in the YK Delta, Bethel 49 degrees low tonight, McCormick 47. Seward Peninsula area, mid 40s to lower or upper 30s, with Kotzebue getting down to 38 degrees for tonight. Then along the Arctic coastline, right around 40 degrees out west. As you get further off to the east, dropping down to just above freezing. Dead Horse 33 degrees tonight, 34 for Kaktovik. But Arctic Village dropping down below freezing, 29 degrees. Eagle even colder at 27 degrees there. Rest of the interior warmer as we get out west, dropping down into the 30s as we get out to the east. South Central in the mid-40s around the Kenai Peninsula, and then dropping down to just about freezing as we get into the Copper River Basin, 33 degrees for Glen Allen, and then dropping down right around 40 degrees for a lot of locations in the Panhandle. Some areas, especially along the water, staying a little bit warmer in the upper 40s there. And for our highs tomorrow, getting right around 60 degrees for many locations around the Panhandle. Warmest as we get furthest to the South Craig and Ketchikan, both at 63 for a high tomorrow. In the South Central, looking at temperatures in the mid-50s throughout most locations, 56 for Kodiak, 52 for Seward, 55 for Homer. Then in the interior, getting up into the mid-60s, some of the most warm locations, Fairbanks 66 degrees, Bettles up to as high as 61 tomorrow, Fort Yukon 57. And then in the 40s along eastern parts of the Arctic coastline, 48 Kaktovik, but warmer again out west as we get up to around 54 degrees for Point Lay, 54 Wainwright. As we look down the western coastline in the Kotzebue Sound area, getting up to as high as right around 60 degrees there, with Kivalina at 61, Shishmaref 57. Down in the Norton Sound area, mid-50s there, mid-50s in the YK Delta area, and in the Bristol Bay area. then the mid to upper 50s as we get along the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, with the exception of shimmy out there, only getting up to around 52 degrees for tomorrow. Taking a look now at our aviation forecast. With all the rain and fog we're going to see out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, expecting to see a lot of IFR conditions out there as well. And then with our fronts pushing in over the state, going to see those MVFR and IFR conditions expand further to the north and east as those fronts move in that direction as well, seeing those MVFR and IFR conditions right up the Alaska Range as we move throughout the day, with some of those MVFR conditions making it into Prince William Sound area as well. And then we have some areas of IFR and MVFR conditions up along the Arctic coastline with all the fog that we're expecting to see up there, but pretty clear down in the Panhandle for tomorrow. The passes, we're expecting AKwx to be VFR as well as Adigan Pass. See Lake Clark and Marable starting off MVFR, dropping down to IFR. Raining going to start off VFR, drop all the way down to IFR in the afternoon. Windy Pass should stay VFR throughout the day, as well as Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass. Tanita Pass will start off VFR, drop down to marginal conditions, and Portage will also start VFR, drop down to MVFR later in the day. Chilkoot and White should both be VFR throughout the day for tomorrow. Taking a look at our freezing levels, we can see a lot of warmer air coming in with that front pushing up from the south and starting to push off with our colder air exiting out to the east, where we can see the surface freezing lines right where we saw those coldest temperatures in our afternoon chart, and expecting the lowest lows tonight. Then we can see behind our cold front some of that cold air dropping down towards the central Aleutian Islands. For our icing for tomorrow, extending from the YK Delta out to the Prince William Sound area above 15,000 feet, and then the Kotzebue Sound area above 15,000 feet there as well, should be pretty light. Then our jet stream for tomorrow, a westerly component of the jet coming in at around 80 knots there, going just over the western Aleutian Islands, dropping down to only 75 knots, but then picking back up as we start heading towards the Bristol Bay area, out of a southwesterly direction, 105 knots there, and then kind of curving to head back to the south as we get out over the northern part of the Gulf. And then along the eastern portion of the state, northwesterly flow, 80 knots, picking up to 105 knots as we go out over the Panhandle and then curving back out into the eastern part of the Pacific. Dropping down to 9,000 feet. Quite a lot of different flow patterns here. We'll start with our high up over the northern part of the state. Pretty weak flow there, only 5 to 10 knots out of that northerly direction, becoming more easterly out over the northeastern parts of the interior. Then out over the southern part of the state, 10 knots out of a westerly direction, becoming northwesterly, 10 to 15 out over the Panhandle. But as we can see here, our strongest part of the jet there, about 30 knots going out over Kodiak Island out of a southwesterly direction. And that we're going to see continued with the main part of our flow, our strongest flow, south of the Aleutian Islands, 35 knots, dropping down to 25 to 30 knots, just hugging right along that southern part of the Aleutians, headed out towards Kodiak there. Then out over the eastern parts of the Bering Sea, weak westerly flow, 10 to 15 knots, with our strongest flow way out west, around 30 knots there on the southern side of our low. Down to 3,000 feet, pretty similar flow, westerly directions out there with our low, about 25 knots, becoming weaker, about 15 knots as we get out to the remainder of the Bering Sea and dropping off out over the state to around 10 knots. But it does pick back up as we get closer to the Kotzebue Sound area, easterly direction there, around 30 knots. And still some of our stronger flows south of the Aleutian Islands, 20 knots out of a westerly direction, becoming stronger up towards 30 as we get out over Kodiak Island, but dropping down again as we get over the southern part of the mainland, about 15 knots there. And that's what's going to pick back up to the 30 knots out towards Kotzebue. Then our high pressure off the Arctic coastline, easterly flow around 15 knots there. Then pretty weak as we get over the Panhandle area, only around 5 knots out of a northwesterly direction. Then we drop off, or pick up rather, out over the Gulf of Alaska with that northwesterly flow, 20 to 25 knots there. That takes us down to our turbulence. Should be pretty light, not any really strong winds at this level, but we'll see some of that lighter turbulence anywhere from southern parts of Cook Inlet down through Kodiak Island below 5,000 feet. And then on the northern side of Kotzebue Sound, they're pushing up more towards Point Hope below 4,000 feet. They're expected to be pretty light with some isolated moderate turbulence. And we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
NOAA's national marine sanctuaries protect areas of national significance for their exceptional natural beauty and resources. Research and monitoring expeditions provide scientists with valuable knowledge about the biodiversity and ecological integrity of these fragile underwater systems. The knowledge does not come easy. Their mission is challenging and sometimes dangerous, but these risks pale in comparison to the wealth of information that awaits them. This is Expedition Sanctuary Quest. Preparing a research vessel to go to sea is a huge undertaking. Over the course of one day, the empty ship transforms into a high-tech research platform. Tons of equipment, provisions, and supplies have to be loaded and stowed. The crew must double-check every last detail. Once at sea, the ship must be entirely self-sufficient. To keep everything running smoothly, the crew charts a cruise plan to coincide with the schedule of research. The goal of this expedition is to assess the health of offshore and nearshore marine ecosystems. The NOAA ship MacArthur will spend 2 months at sea, focusing on all the national marine sanctuaries along the West Coast, from Southern California to Northern Washington. Research takes place around the clock, and as night closes over the sanctuary, a team of special map makers deploy their side-scan sonar. The sonar will provide acoustic information to make detailed maps of the ocean floor. As one set of scientists are finishing up the night shift, another is being called to start their day. Wake-up calls come early, usually before the sun is up. By dawn, Chief Scientist Sarah Fangman is on the bridge, checking the plans for the deployment of the remotely operated vehicle.
Our weather has turned a little bit, and so we're going to have to move to a more protected area where we can work. Well, as long as we're heading in this direction, because the weather is forcing us that way, we'd like to stop.
Once calmer waters are found, the science continues. The remotely operated vehicle crew prepares their machine for its dive. The ROV allows the scientists to penetrate the unexplored depths, which account for 90% of the ocean. There is no idle time. While the ROV is being prepared, another group of scientists takes seawater and surface plankton samples. As the samples are collected, they go straight to the onboard lab, where they are processed and analyzed.
The ROV can stay down many hours, whereas divers are limited with supplied air, and we can rotate shifts and go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The cameras on the ROV are the scientists' eyes into the ocean. These cameras will confirm what the scientists have found through the side-scan sonar mapping. The ROV also allows scientists the opportunity to do species counts and more detailed habitat classification.
Yes, look at the anemones and the corals, cup corals.
Oh yeah.
That is
excellent.
gorgeous.
Excellent. Habitat's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Oh,
did you
nice
see it
one.
just caught
Right.
that?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Oh yeah.
A research ship can be a dangerous place with hazards all around. Everyone must be alert to these and know how to deal with emergencies. Fire and evacuation drills are performed without warning at any time of the day or night. As the science work goes on, the ship's crew also works around the clock. Engineers keep the engines operating properly, while the deck officers constantly monitor the ship's location. The deck crew operates all the machinery needed to perform the research, and the galley crew has to be sure all 40 people on board get fed. As night falls again, another shift of scientists begin their work in trawling for plankton.
Half moon out there, so there's quite a bit of light, which will affect how fast and how high these critters come up in the water column.
Okay, watch the slack there, folks.
Okay, got her. Let her go.
One more step in measuring productivity of an area.
Juvenile deposits, krill, squid, copepods.
After a long, wet night, dawn finally comes. The ship begins a transit to the next area for work. As miles of ocean slide beneath the hull, the observations and data collecting continue. Seabird and marine mammal observers are out working. Bird and whale counts help determine the health of a given area. For 2 months, this grueling schedule of day and night scientific work continues, searching for the understanding that will provide solutions to better manage resources within our national marine sanctuary.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a quick look at our ice edge. We do have some ice just to the north of the barrier islands. They're just off the coastline of Prudhoe Bay, and that is expected to diminish over the next couple of days. Then we have our main ice pack further to the north, and with the counterclockwise or clockwise flow of that ice, we are expecting that to push off a little bit to the west there, 10 to 20 miles over the next couple days with that big ice pack. Then looking now for the southeast for our main marine forecast, primarily out of a north or northwesterly direction. Strongest winds up further to the north in the inside waters, 25 knots there, diminishing down to 10 as we get further to the south. And then out over the Gulf, northerly flow for the most part, 10 to 20 knots, strongest further to the south, and then southeasterly flow near Yakutat around 10 knots there. Then on Friday, flow becoming more south or southeasterly, 10 knots in the inside water, seas around 2 feet. And then up to as high as 25 knots out over the Gulf there, with seas getting as high as 9 feet as we get further to the north. Then in the south central, primary flow out of an east or northeast direction, weaker there by Prince William Sound, 10 knots, getting up to as high as 30 knots as we get closer to the Barren Islands. And then we have more of a southerly flow on the southeastern side of Kodiak Island, 20 knots there. Seas around 8 feet in the highest part further to the south. And the inside channels here, Cook Inlet 3 to 4 feet, and then 3 feet for Shelikof Strait as well on Thursday. Then on Friday, flow dropping off quite a bit in the inside waters, primarily variable flow around 10 knots there. Then you can kind of see the easterly flow out by Montague Island, 30 knots, dropping down to around 15 knots out of a more northwesterly flow as you get closer towards the Barren Islands. And then by Kodiak, out of a westerly direction, 15 knots there. Seas highest way out east in the northern part of the Gulf, 9 feet. Then for the Alaska Peninsula, westerly flow, 15 to 25 knots, strongest as we get off towards the east. Seas highest on the Pacific side, 9 feet there on Thursday. Then on Friday, flow continuing to be westerly, 15 knots everywhere. Strongest seas on the Pacific side again, 7 to 8 feet, 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side. Then for the Aleutian Islands, a weaker flow around 15 knots out of a southwesterly direction. A little bit stronger there by the western Aleutians, 7 feet for seas with those 20 knots of wind. Then on Friday, becoming variable and 10 knots way out west. Dropping off throughout much of the islands as well. Southwesterly flow continuing about 15 knots there. Seas strongest or highest on the Pacific side around 8 feet. Then for the west coast, pretty light flow, 10 to 15 knots out of a southerly direction except for south of Makoriak, out of a northwesterly flow there, 15 knots. As we go into Friday, pretty weak flow continuing, largely variable winds around 10 knots, picking up south of Nunavik Island, westerly flow 15 knots there. Then up along the Arctic coastline, we're going to see easterly flow, 20 to 25 knots, strongest as we get further out towards the east. Then as we move into Friday, continuing with that easterly flow, getting up to as high now as 30 knots just north of Dead Horse and Prudhoe Bay. Then it's southeasterly flows to get further off to the west, 10 to 20 knots there, strongest as we get further up to the north. Quick recap throughout the state. We do have a low pressure system in the southern Bering moving towards the Bristol Bay area tonight, bringing in rain to all of the southwest, Kodiak Island, and places in the south central as well, starting to make its way closer towards the Anchorage area, Matsu Valley as we get further into the early morning hours. Way out east, potential for some isolated evening thunderstorms way in the southeastern parts of the Panhandle. Then up along the Arctic coastline, high pressure dominating, keeping most of the precipitation out of that area, and then rain and fog throughout all of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. That's going to be true on Thursday as well, with that westerly flow bringing in the rain and fog throughout the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands. Our low not really moving a whole lot on Thursday, starting to weaken and diminish, but bringing in rain throughout the south central up towards the Norton Sound area, and now further into the south central, where we are seeing rain now in Cordova, Valdez, getting up closer towards Talkeetna. But in the central part of the interior up to the Arctic coastline, not a lot of precipitation, but we do have some fog all the way along the Arctic coast. Then down in the southeastern part of the state, things are going to clear out on Thursday, but as we move into Friday, rain coming back in with a new low out in the eastern part of the Gulf, and then rain showers throughout southern part of the state down to the Gulf Coast, and then continuing to see fog up along the Arctic coastline, but northern parts of the interior should be pretty clear. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for...
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.